Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the A&E Food Testing Show. Today's topic, one forward, one backward. Food safety traceability with Pamela Sweeten. Pamela is the owner of Key Sweeten Consulting and representative for Advanced Traceability Solutions and ScoringAg, an advocate for safe food. Pamela attended California State University Stanislaus as a communications major, then in 1992 began her career with the almond industry. Her experience began with transportation, logistics, and shipping of almonds. She's recently been promoting food safety and quality in the almond industry. She's active in the California Women for Agriculture, the American Agri-Women, the Central California Children's Hospital, and the Escalon FFA Ag Boosters organizations. Now, welcome with me, Pamela Sweeten, to our show to be interviewed about one forward and one backward. Pamela?
Hi, Andy. Thank you very much for that kind introduction and for having me on your show today.
Well, you have been a guest before and contributed significantly to our listenership of food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers. We're welcoming you today to talk about one forward and one backward. Would you like to add anything to your introduction?
You know what? I think that's fine. One thing I would like to add is Verispect. It's a young company that's just starting, and they're actually doing and they've built a platform for mobile inspections with a smartphone. So that's another company that I'm working with to help them in the marketplace. And it's pretty exciting to see all these companies emerging to help with mobile inspections and compliance, as well as record keeping and traceback and traceability.
Well, that leads into our main discussion. Why does food safety require traceability of products in the first place?
Well, I like to always say, if you don't know where it came from, how do you know where it went? As I go through the grocery store aisles, we're able to see on our canned goods and our produce in the frozen section what country it comes from. But is that all we can find out? And I think through the modern technology that's available, we would be able to have a lot more information in that barcode that would help the consumer actually be able to decide better if that's what they want to put on their family's dinner plate. With the traceability options that are out there, and with FSMA, which is the Food Safety Modernization Act, we're seeing a lot of activities occurring and taking place. Recently, FDA just released I was reading in a newspaper this week, they just released the update of the Traceability Pilot Program report on Monday, and it was really exciting for me to see that even though they were doing these pilot studies, they still couldn't trace back all the product due to the systems that they were currently using for this pilot study. The PTI, which is the Produce Traceability Initiative, which includes, encouraging current industry-led initiatives and not excluding any commodities, they're still having problems with the product falling through the supply chain and knowing exactly where it went or where it came from. The one up, one down goes to, if you know where it came from and you know where you shipped it, you're good. And that's the attitude that everyone's taken. However, I believe that we as producers and processors need to have a more active role in this in order to protect the consumers. And I believe that's my belief, but I also feel that, it's something that we can solve as an industry working together.
Wonderful. Let me ask you a question. What are the minimum requirements of traceability?
The minimum requirements would be one up and one down. That would be the bare minimum anyone would want to have in their warehouse or in their produce shed. However, what we can do now is we can not only have the documentation of the farmer's paperwork that can electronically move to whoever's harvesting that product, that can then move into whoever's trucking the produce from the field. And what happens is that information continually moves up the supply chain. So it can start in the field, go to the harvesting crew, move on to the trucking company, move into the cooler or the warehouse. As it moves out of the warehouse or cooler to the next trucking company that's moving that product, and then to the grocery store. And it really shouldn't stop at the grocery store. And that's part of the problem I think PTI has, is because it does stop at the grocery store. When you have the commingling of different products in a produce bin, not knowing where it came from becomes an issue. Where with some of the newer technology that is available, each item can actually have their own label and a barcode on it, and that barcode is going to show the consumer exactly where that produce was harvested or the product.
Well, as I think about one step forward for food producers, that means I as a producer know exactly where each lot that I produced went to as far as me selling it. And where it went from there is that next party's responsibility. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that is exactly what one step forward would mean. And right now, I think what we're seeing with some of the incidences where FDA has gone in and enforced their new, how do I want to put this, their new authority with the Food Safety Modernization Act, where we're not just recalling one person's product, we're maybe recalling everything that left that warehouse because they're not knowing exactly where the problem lies. You know, if you've got multiple farmers that have shipped into a warehouse distribution center, maybe all that produce from that warehouse is being recalled. Where if we did have individual differentiating barcoding systems in place, we wouldn't have to recall as much product, and we would be able to minimize and mitigate the liability to the industry, whether it's, you know, spinach or almonds, or maybe it's citrus, or maybe it's beef. You know, all of a sudden we have a recall and no one's going to buy that product in the grocery store. And that's where I think the FSMA and the traceability would benefit every producer, processor, grower, shipper, but also the consumer. They'll be able to look in their groceries, in their cupboards that they've brought home, and see if they actually, in fact, have any of those products.
Very good. So that's a very clear explanation of one forward, from the production site to the next step. What does one step back mean?
Well, one step back would be if you're a farmer and you're purchasing seed, knowing where that seed came from. The farmer, you know, he's going to buy it from multiple seed companies that are available, but also, you know, knowing where was that seed grown, where was it, where did it go through its growing stage, and the processes that it took to get to the farmer. I mean, those are also important things and traits that a grower would want to know just for his production record. Having that available to him would definitely be a benefit. But the one step back also can apply just in a distribution center. Where is that product coming from? Which farms, which farmers, which coolers? You know, if you're looking at a big grocery store chain like Safeway or Wegmans, you know, they want to be able to know, we've got it held in our distribution center, we know where it came from, but as it leaves that distribution center, you could have multiple cases in one lot going to another grocery store just to make the order that they need. And that's where the traceability really comes into effect in those situations. But also from the grower side, if they're harvesting a field in the morning, they move to a different field in the afternoon, or they move fields, and stuff going into that cooler, you want it to be identified as the different fields, not just that crew and what county it was from. You'd want to be able to go back to the field level. And that's the unique thing about some of the systems that are available, because they actually have the GPS location on the label so that the farm labor contractor or the farmer that's doing the harvesting, they're actually going to know where in the field that product was labeled, if they're labeling cases out there in the field, or even if they just did a pallet at a time, they would still have a GPS location that could be on that label. So if there was an incident out in the field or with a product, they can go right back to that field location. And these GPS labels are actually so accurate, it's within 10 feet of where the label was printed. So if you're picking and harvesting, maybe you're doing strawberries, and you know how strawberry harvest can go. You can have multiple farm workers in a row picking, and some of these systems are so sophisticated that they actually have that harvester's ID on that label. So you not only know where in the field it was harvested, but who did the harvest.
That's amazing. Let me ask you a quick question. You mentioned it a couple times, liability. I think I heard that word in there, and I think I heard recall, and all of those words mean that somebody did something wrong or something was wrong with the product. What are the best practices for food managers to engage in this sort of traceability in the event something went wrong?
Well, I think looking at your suppliers, if you're a food manager in a grocery store or with a restaurant chain, you're definitely going to want to look at your suppliers to see what good manufacturing or good agricultural practices they have in place, but also making sure that they have their HACCP, which is their hazard and critical control points. You want to make sure that your suppliers are doing these things, and record keeping and traceability goes on with those. If you're a processor and you're buying fruit or vegetables or nuts or grains or seeds from multiple suppliers, and you ship it on to the next step in the supply chain, maybe it's the bakery, and they're going to get this wheat or corn or whatever, and it could have multiple suppliers in that load of products that's going to that bakery. Now, if that bakery comes back to the processor and says, we have a problem and this is what it is, and that processor can't move back down the supply chain, so he has to assume all the risk, or she has to assume all the risk of that product. Therefore, he's going to be, or his insurance company is going to be dealing with claims of liability claims, and he's going to have to assume that risk. Where if he could push it back down the supply chain, the further down you can push it, the less risk you're going to be assuming, because you've got documentation and records from those previous handlers or processors, harvesters, whatever the case might be. I've actually seen recalls this last week, everything from eggs in marshmallow-covered chocolate-covered marshmallow eggs that they thought eggs were in, to plastic in some loaves of bread. And, these are both recalls that are happening, and they probably might have happened at another previous supplier before it got to the finished product to be made. And those are all record-keeping and documentation issues that you would want to address and make sure you have those steps in place for mitigating your risks and liability.
Well, Pam, you've been in practice since 1992 in this very narrow area of traceability and working with almonds in food production. Tell us a little bit about your practice and the types of clients that you've helped since 1992.
Sure. Actually, with Advanced Traceability Solutions, one of our clients happens to be New Line Co., and they're a grower. They're also a packer shipper. They're also an importer. What they're doing with their labeling system in their facilities is every piece of fruit that comes through their facility has a label on it. And they're able to have exactly what field it came from, who grew the product. They even have some record keeping in there that would go back and point to what products went as far as inputs in to grow the product, whether they're getting some magnesium, what company that product is coming from. So it's really exciting because they're not just a Florida company that grows citrus, but they're also an importer of papayas coming from Belize and the Dominican Republic as well as Guatemala. So they want to differentiate which country that piece of produce came from. So it's really a global supply chain is what we're dealing with here around the world now. We can eat fruit any time of the year from some region, and it doesn't matter if it's the dead cold of winter in Minnesota, they can still get watermelon. So knowing where that product actually began is so important. And I believe that New Line Co., their suppliers have accepted the process so well that they're actually expanding into other areas that they're already using it on. But even Wegmans Supermarket, we've got some suppliers that ship to Wegmans, and Wegmans has been very happy with their ability to know where the product began and the steps that it took to get to their facility. Because of the barcoding and labeling and scanning, that they are able to know how long it was on the truck. The truck temperature can even be recorded because of the technology that's available that John Ryan offers through his company with the RFID labeling, but also temperature sensitivity and knowing the temperature in that label. So it's really unique what is happening in the industry with so many advances every day. And it's amazing to think that it's all agriculture-based, but it's so much more than that. We are able to we can go online and we can ship a package from Amazon, and you can track that package all the way through the process. You can see when UPS picked it up. You can see when it was dropped at a distribution center, when it was picked up from the distribution center. So this is what we're doing now with the supply chain with food, is actually that same approach so that you can track the product and see the steps that it went through to get to your dinner plate. And it's the messaging that the farmers can show and use, or the producers and processors, because they can use this as a marketing tool that they can actually 110% say, we know where our product's been and we know what it took to get to your plate. Also, using it for sustainability. They can use that because they're documenting and recording all the products that they're actually using in the field, that sustainability would just help them in their own marketing issues further ahead.
Well, Pam, you've given us a pretty good outline of these capabilities. I have a question for you real quick. Are buyers, and you mentioned some grocery stores and some other buyers, are they more than likely to do business with vendors that have these capabilities, and rather than those that don't?
I think it all comes down a lot of times to what the price of the product is, obviously, for grocery stores or suppliers and buyers. But we have seen with one of our suppliers that goes into a large grocery chain that they were actually they were doing a tour with the buyers at their facility, and they had an excess supply of celery. But the grocery chain was so impressed with what they were doing, they actually bought the celery, ran a special on it. It helped out the grower, processor, because they were able to sell the product, and they were able to give something to their customers at a great price. So it's a win-win in that situation, and it's no different than using your pencil and paper that you're using now when you go to use a PDA, whether it's an Intermex system or if you're using a desktop and using different printers that are available to do your labeling in the field or at your desk as you're receiving product. So we've seen it be a real win-win for a lot of our customers.
Well, you alluded to it earlier. Another question for you, sort of out of the blue. Can consumers use these same barcodes on their smartphones and see it as tracking? You know, like when we get a FedEx package, we can see, or we send one, we can see that number and look it up on the Internet. Can you do the same thing with a piece of fruit?
Absolutely. And I would encourage everyone to do that, whether you're getting your blueberries in Costco or Sam's Club or your lemons and limes at the local grocery. If they've got a barcode on it, you certainly should be able to scan that barcode and see where it came from. And this is just another marketing tool that the farmer can reach their consumers. They can have information that started at their farm and show the consumer their farm. And it's really nice for a consumer to put a face with their food. So many people are removed from the farm. We're not 1 or 2 generations off the farm anymore. We could be 8, 9, 10 generations off of a farm. And I think the more we are off of a farm, the more disconnect we have with our food supply. And I just like to encourage growers all the time, whenever they can reach out to consumers, to do that, because the consumers are the ones that are voting for the people in Sacramento or Washington, D.C., or wherever your state capital is, that determines the rules and regulations that you have to enforce on your farm. So if you can educate your consumer on your best practices and what you're doing to make it a safe environment for their children and grandchildren, the more likely they're going to work with you to help you out in a situation, whether it be in Sacramento or your state capital or a national issue, that they can come and step up alongside the grower, producer, packer, and say, hey, you know what, they offer a safe, reliable food supply. And that leads, that's just why I got involved in California Women for Agriculture in the first place. My son was going from 4-H to FFA, and I thought, you know what, we're not farmers. I rely on agriculture for my income, but I'm worried about a food supply, a domestic, safe food supply in this country in 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. What's that picture going to look like? We get so many of our produce from a global region all over the world coming in that, it would be nice to have a safe, reliable domestic food supply that we know that we can feed ourselves.
Well, Pam, you've certainly given us a lot to think about today on traceability. I was wondering, in our concluding remarks, if you could let us know a little bit more about your practice and if you're what types of clients you serve and if you're open to receiving others.
Sure. Andy, thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity to reach out to your audience that's listening and to hopefully, of course, meet someone that's looking for a solution to their problem. And, of course, I'm always accepting clients. I believe in the products that I represent and knowing that they are a very reasonable, cost-effective, economical solution for a grower, a packer, a processor to use. And that's why I do represent them. And I just feel that it's a moral and ethical situation for myself to be in. And I do have a website. It's called Trace the Food is Advanced Traceability Solutions website, and you can go there to see the different products that they've got available. I do a blog that's called trackmycrop.com, TrackMyCrop, and I try to keep something posted on that. It's been a busy couple months, so it's not been as filled as it should be, but I think I'll go post I like to post things that I find that FDA's printed out. So I think I'll post the recent pilot study that they just did so consumers can go in and read it. It's a very nice article that was done by another company that I don't really see the need to rewrite something that's already well done and state the facts. FDA, of course, is always willing to talk with producers, growers, consumers, packers, shippers. If you have any questions, feel free to call them and ask questions. They would rather have you be compliant and be working towards a solution than to try and sneak away from the problem. And I think that if all the growers, packers, and shippers work together on this, that we can have a solution and resolve and have a Food Safety Modernization Act that will guarantee us of a safe, reliable food supply. So I just want to thank you again for the opportunity. And if any of your clients have a question, they're certainly welcome to email me at pamela@trackmycrop.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Or my phone number that they can reach me at is 209-606-1418. Thank you again, and I just want to encourage growers, packers, and shippers to always think of the end user, which is the consumer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. Well, I hope you have a great evening. And look, when these new FDA requirements are actually published on traceability, I'd like to invite you to come back on the show and to let our audience of thousands of food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers hear the new regulations and all the facts. Would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely. And the comment period is open until May 16th. So if you haven't issued your comments, be sure to do that as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again, and wish you a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.